Over the past 3 years, you've probably, without even noticing it, blown $20,000 on things you don't need, just because you wanted to look more successful. And you know what the saddest part is? No one even noticed. Today, using the example of one ordinary guy, I'll show you with specific numbers exactly how the status trap works. There is this moment when a person stands in front of a display window and feels that this is it. Not just a phone, not just an item. The feeling that if you buy it right now, something in life will finally fall into place. Something unnamed, but that's been waiting for a very long time. Tyler stood exactly like that. Friday, 7 p.m. A mall on the avenue, the Apple display. He had just finished his shift. 10 hours on his feet, hot kitchen, the smell of fryer oil in his hair that doesn't wash out on the first try. It was already dark outside, and in the glass of the window he saw his reflection. A $40 H&M jacket, New Balance sneakers he spent 3 weeks choosing, the face of a man who is tired but holding on. An iPhone 15 Pro in black titanium lay on a stand under soft lighting. Next to it, the price tag, $1,199, or $59 a month if you sign up for Buy Now, Pay Later right here, right now. The consultant, a young guy in a white shirt, was already looking at Tyler with that professional smile that means, "I'm ready, just say the word." Tyler walked into the store. He was 34 years old. He worked as a line cook at a diner downtown, a mid-level joint, $15 lunch specials, standard menu, regulars on weekdays. His salary was $3,500 a month, sometimes $4,000 if it was a good month. It's not a little, but not the kind of money that makes it easy to live in a big city when your rent is $1,500, plus utilities, a phone bill, food, clothes, and that constant feeling that you somehow have to keep up appearances. Keep up appearances. Tyler didn't invent this expression. It was just there, like the air. He grew up in a family where respect was judged by your belongings. His father always said, "People judge you by your clothes." His mother made sure to bring a good bottle of wine when visiting friends, even if payday was a week away. It wasn't hypocrisy. It was a survival strategy in a social environment where the external was the language of the internal. Tyler learned this language well, maybe too well. He upgraded his previous phone 2 years ago. The one before that, another 2 years prior. Every time there was a logic to it. The old one is lagging, the camera is outdated, it can't handle the new apps. But every time, beneath that logic, was something else. Something he didn't articulate out loud, but felt the moment he pulled out the new phone in public. A slight, almost imperceptible feeling. There, I'm on that level. I'm not falling behind. The consultant explained the specs. Tyler listened, and at the same time, didn't listen. He had already decided, he just hadn't said it out loud yet. 48 megapixel camera, a 17 Pro chip, aerospace-grade titanium body. The words fell beautifully, as if the phone wasn't a gadget, but an architectural masterpiece. Tyler nodded. In his pocket lay a Samsung Galaxy A54, bought 8 months ago, working flawlessly, with a good camera and a full battery. A phone that gave absolutely zero technical reasons to be replaced. Only one reason, aesthetic and social. It wasn't an iPhone. At work, 2 of his coworkers had already upgraded to the 15. One of the regulars, a guy in his 40s who always ordered the same cheeseburger and fries, would put his Pro Max on the table every time and stare into it while waiting for his food. $59 a month. It sounded perfectly fine. Almost unnoticeable against his overall expenses. He quickly did the math in his head. 24 months, that's $1,416. Wait, the price tag is $1,199. So, an overpayment of $217? He didn't follow that thought to the end. The consultant had already opened the financing form. Tyler gave his ID details. While they filled out the paperwork, he looked at his hands. Broad, a bit roughened from the hot kitchen, with a barely noticeable cut on his index finger from a knife 3 days ago. The hands of a man who works hard. He knew he cooked better than half the chefs in places far more expensive than his diner. He knew recipes, he knew textures, he knew how to properly caramelize onions, and why pan temperature matters in the first 30 seconds. He was respected in the kitchen. The head chef trusted him with complex dishes. But when he clocked out on a Friday night and took the subway, that knowledge stayed inside. Outside, an H&M jacket, an unbranded backpack, a phone that was now the wrong one. The consultant handed him the box. Tyler took it. It was light, almost weightless, as if there was nothing inside. But it felt different in his hands. Dense white packaging, an embossed logo, a feeling of the absolute rightness of the moment. He signed in 2 places, got his copy of the installment agreement, and walked out of the store. It was cold outside. He took the new phone out of the box right at the entrance, turned it on, and waited for the screen to load. The Apple logo glowed white. He felt it, that quiet, almost shameful satisfaction. As if something had been resolved. What exactly was resolved, he couldn't explain. But in that moment, it didn't matter. He put the phone in his pocket, zipped up his jacket, and headed to the subway. The Samsung lay in his backpack, alive, working, needed by no one. Behind him, the display window glowed. Ahead was Friday, exhaustion, and a feeling that would fade a little by morning, but tonight would feel incredibly right. This is exactly how what we are talking about today begins. Not with greed, not with stupidity, with a very understandable, very human desire to look the way you feel inside, or the way you want to feel. The difference between those two things cost Tyler far more than the $217 overpayment on his payment plan. But he would realize that later. 3 weeks passed since the purchase. The new iPhone didn't seem new anymore. It just became a phone. It sat in his pocket, got warm from his hand, showed notifications. The camera was good, that's true. But Tyler took about as many photos as before. Food at work and occasionally a sunset from the kitchen window. The A17 Pro chip was never needed for anything the previous Samsung couldn't have handled. It was Tuesday. The lunch shift change, 20 minutes in the break room. Tyler sat on an overturned milk crate, scrolling through his phone. Mike sat down next to him, a line cook just like him, a year younger, who had been working there for 4 years. Mike was the kind of guy who says what he thinks, without malice and without filtering. Mike looked at the phone in Tyler's hands and asked, "Got a new one?" Tyler said, "Yeah, the 15. Mike nodded, then paused for a second and asked, "Through Klarna?" Tyler said, "Well, yeah, $59 a month, it's fine." Mike didn't answer right away. He pulled out his own phone, an old Motorola, scuffed, in a silicone case, screen without a single crack, and started calculating something. He turned the screen to Tyler. It read, 59 times 24 equals 1,416. Then Mike wrote next to it, 1,416 minus 1,199 equals 217. Tyler said, "Well, I know it's a $217 overpayment." Mike shook his head and typed another line. "Now calculate all your phones over the last 6 years. There are hundreds of stories like this. If you want to unpack these mechanics before they hit your wallet, subscribe to the channel. That's exactly what we do here." Tyler took the calculator from him. iPhone 11 in 2019, $700, also on a payment plan. iPhone 13 in 2021, $900, part credit, part savings. Now the 15, $1,416 including the overpayment. Total, $3,016 over 6 years just on phones. He stared at that number. $3,016. Mike stayed quiet next to him. Not gloating, just silent. The way people are when someone needs a second to process. Tyler said out loud, "That's almost a down payment on a decent car." Mike shrugged. Or a couple of months' rent without stressing. Or 3 years of investing with a decent return. Tyler didn't reply. He handed the calculator back and looked at his new phone. Sitting in his hand, still just as beautiful, still just as titanium. And completely meaningless in the new light of that number. But the phone was just the beginning. Because Tyler, while sitting on that crate, started remembering the rest. Sneakers. He bought sneakers twice a year. Not because the old ones ripped, but because new models came out, or he saw a pair on someone that looked right. Average receipt, $100 to $150. Over 3 years, 6 pairs. About $800. Clothes. He didn't buy expensive things, or so he thought. Tommy Hilfiger on sale, Ralph Lauren on clearance, occasionally something from Supreme when he found it for a relatively normal price. Every purchase seemed rational, a promotion, a discount, a good deal. But he never added it all up together. Never. He tried to right now. Banking app, transaction history, filtered by clothes and shoes over the last 3 years. The phone thought for about 5 seconds. Then it showed the number. $14,000. Tyler read it again. $14,000 just on clothes and shoes in 3 years. He earned an average of $3,500 a month. That meant over 3 years, he spent exactly 4 months' worth of salary on clothes. On things, most of which hung in his closet or had been worn 3 or 4 times. Mike glanced at the screen. Whistled quietly. Not mockingly, just as a reaction to the sheer size of the number. Tyler said, "I don't understand how this happened." Mike said, "You bought little by little. There was never one big purchase that would be scary to make. Always small, unnoticeable ones that looked like the right move." That was exactly it. Spot on. Not one crazy decision for a couple of grand, but 100 small decisions for $20, each of which seemed entirely logical. A sale. Need a new jacket. Old sneakers are a bit scuffed. Phone is only $60 a month. Separately, no big deal. Together, almost $20,000 over 3 years just to look a certain way. Mike said one more thing before getting up and heading back to the kitchen. He said it without inflection, just as a matter of fact. "You know what the most interesting part is? None of the people you bought all this to impress even noticed. They looked at the phone for a second, at the jacket for 2. Then they looked back at their own stuff." Tyler stayed sitting on the crate for a few more minutes. He thought about how this mechanic works. You don't buy the item, you buy the feeling. The feeling lives for 3 days, a week max. Then it fades, and the next thing appears promising the exact same high. The cycle never ends because the feeling never becomes permanent. It is temporary by nature, and the industry knows this. He opened his banking app again, looked at his card balance, looked at the line with the monthly installment for the phone, looked at his spending history for the last month. The picture he had of himself before, "I track my money, I buy on sale, I'm not a big spender," began to peel at the edges like wet paper. Not sharply, slowly, reluctantly, but irreversibly. Mike was already yelling from the kitchen, "Tyler, come on, orders are up." Tyler stood up, put the phone in his pocket, and went back to the stove. Hot kitchen, familiar smells, habitual movements. Everything exactly as usual. But the $3,016 didn't go anywhere, and neither did the $14,000. They just lay there now, like those numbers on Mike's calculator. silently, without judgment, just as a fact that could no longer be unseen. David appeared in Tyler's life by chance, the way most important people appear. Not through a recommendation, not through networking, but through a mutual friend, Chloe, who invited them both to a birthday party at a small bar in Brooklyn. Tyler arrived after his shift, a bit tired, wearing that same H&M jacket. David sat in the corner with a glass of water, reading something on his phone. A regular guy in his 40s, in a simple gray sweater, no watch, no noticeable accessories. Chloe introduced them. "This is Tyler, a cook, makes the best food I know. This is David, used to work in banking, now consults." They nodded to each other and talked about nothing for a while. The weather, the bar, how Chloe always picks places with bad acoustics. Then David asked, "You said you're a cook, that's interesting. Do you have an irregular schedule?" Tyler said, "Shifts, usually 2 days on, 2 off." David nodded. "So there are days when your head is clear." Tyler didn't immediately get where this was going, but replied, "Well, yeah, sometimes." The conversation could have drifted elsewhere. But Tyler, maybe because the numbers from the break room were still sitting somewhere in the background of his mind, suddenly said, "Listen, you worked in a bank, so you know finance." "Can I ask a stupid question?" David said. "There are no stupid questions, only questions that haven't been asked for a long time." Tyler told him about the calculator, the phone, the $3,016. David listened without interrupting. When Tyler finished, David paused for a second and said, "Want me to show you how it works in detail?" "Not in theory, with real numbers." Tyler said, "Go ahead." David took a paper napkin, there were no others in the bar, and started writing. First, the phone. You take a 24-month payment plan at 0%. That's what the contract says. But the store gets the full price from the bank right away. The bank makes money because the store gives them a discount, usually 5 to 15% of the total. This is called a merchant discount fee. So 0% for you doesn't mean no one pays. It just means the store pays the bank, not you directly. David wrote a number. With a phone price of $1,199, the hidden fee from the store to the bank is between $60 and $180. That money is already baked into the price of the product. So you're paying it either way, you just don't see the line item in the contract. Tyler looked at the napkin. David continued. Second, branded clothes. You bought Tommy Hilfiger and Ralph Lauren on sale, thinking you were getting quality at a fair price. David asked, "Do you know where most of those clothes are made?" Tyler said, "Well, China probably, or Bangladesh." David nodded. "Right. The production cost of a basic Tommy Hilfiger t-shirt at the factory is between $3 and $6. You pay $30 to $40 for it on sale, thinking you caught a lucky break. But you aren't paying for the cotton or the stitching. You're paying for the license to use the logo, for the right to wear someone else's name. It's an honest business, but you need to understand exactly what you're paying for." David wrote on the napkin, "Price of the item without a logo, $8. Price of the exact same item with a logo, $38. The difference? $30. That's the cost of those 4 letters on your chest." Tyler took the napkin and looked at the numbers, then said, "But doesn't the quality differ?" David tilted his head slightly. "Sometimes, yes. But have you checked? Have you ever bought a basic $8 t-shirt and worn it next to a Tommy one? Compared the fabric, the wear and tear, the fit after washing?" Tyler thought about it, answered honestly, "No." Third, a used car on credit. David asked, "Do you have a car?" Tyler said, "No, I take the subway." David said, "All right, but you've probably thought about it." Tyler nodded. He had, specifically a used Toyota Camry. He'd seen ads. It seemed doable. David wrote on the second napkin. 2018 Toyota Camry, 90,000 miles, market value $15,000. A 3-year loan at 18% APR. Monthly payment, $540. Total payout, $19,440. Overpayment, $4,440. David put another number next to it. Liability and comprehensive insurance for a car like that, $1,500 to $2,500 a year. Maintenance, $500 to $1,000 a year. Downtown parking, $100 to $300 a month. He added it all up and showed Tyler the bottom line. The real cost of owning that car in the first year is about $10,000. Tyler said, "That's almost a third of my annual salary." David said flatly, "Exactly. But people buy them because they look at the monthly payment, not the 3-year total. It's called the illusion of affordability. When a big number is broken down into small pieces, the brain stops perceiving it as big." They ordered another round of drinks. Tyler asked David to continue. Fourth, a premium cashback credit card. David asked, "Do you have a cashback card?" Tyler said, "Yeah, Chase Sapphire. I pay $9 a month for maintenance, but I get up to 5% cash back in certain categories." David nodded. "All right, let's do the math. How much do you spend on food, clothes, and transport on average a month?" Tyler guessed, 1,000, maybe 1,200. David wrote, "Let's say $1,000. The 5% cashback only applies to categories, usually 3 or 4 things. The rest is 1%. In reality, the average cashback across all spending comes out to 2 to 3%. $1,000 times 2% equals $20 a month in cashback, minus the $9 fee. Your net gain is $11 a month. In a year, $132. David paused and added next to it, "But to give you this card, the bank calculates that you'll spend more, because cashback creates a psychological incentive to spend more actively. Studies show that people with cashback cards spend on average 12 to 18% more than those without them. 12% of $1,000 is $120 in extra spending a month. Over a year, $1,440 in unnecessary expenses. All for $132 of cashback." Tyler took both napkins and laid them out in front of him. The numbers stared back at him calmly. No emotion, no judgment, just math. He asked, "Why doesn't anyone explain this?" David shrugged slightly. "They do, just not where you're looking. It's all written in the fine print of the contract. But no one reads the fine print when they want to get the item right now." They sat there for another hour. Tyler listened, occasionally asked questions. David answered briefly and accurately. No moralizing, no preaching, just mechanics. How price works, how credit works, how a logo works, how the illusion of a good deal works where there isn't one. The next day, on his day off, Tyler sat at his desk with his laptop and opened a spreadsheet. He spent 4 hours on it. He listed every single recurring expense over the last 3 years. Not an estimate, but exactly, based on his bank statements. Phones, clothes, shoes, accessories, subscriptions to services he barely used, take-out coffee every morning for $5. That was $2,700 over 3 years, just on coffee in a cup with someone else's logo. The final number for status and semi-status spending over 3 years came out to $19,700. He looked at it for a long time. Then he closed the laptop, got up, splashed his face with cold water, and came back. Opened the spreadsheet again, added a new column. What could have been done with this money? It was the first time in his life that Tyler calculated not how much a thing costs, but how much it actually costs. Dan showed up on Saturday, unannounced. Just texted at 1 p.m. "Come outside, I want to show you something." Tyler was just finishing breakfast, wasn't in a rush, and walked out 10 minutes later. A car was parked by the entrance. A dark blue Tesla Model 3, freshly washed, with water droplets on the roof, as if it had been washed specifically for this exact moment. Dan stood next to it, hands in his pockets, with that smile people get when they want you to be the first to say something nice. Tyler said, "Bought it?" Dan said, "Leased it. 2 years, then I buy it out or return it. $500 a month. Not bad, right?" Tyler looked at the car, then at Dan, then back at the car. Dan worked as an account manager at a small wholesale company. His salary was a bit higher than Tyler's, around $6,000 to $7,000 a month. They had been friends for about 8 years from the old neighborhood. Dan always knew how to live beautifully, or how to create the illusion that he was living beautifully. Tyler used to not differentiate between the two. They got in the car. Inside it smelled like new plastic and something else that only exists in brand new cars. Understated, proper, expensive. Dan ran his hand over the steering wheel and said, "Real leather." Tyler nodded. Dan started the engine. It came on quietly, almost silently. They pulled out of the driveway. As they drove, Dan talked. He talked about how clients perceive you differently when you roll up in a decent car. That last week he met with a potential partner who noticed the car in the parking lot. That image is an investment, not an expense. That in 2 years, he'd either buy it at residual value or just get the next model. Tyler listened and stayed quiet. Not because he had nothing to say, but because he recognized every single word. He had said those words himself, not out loud, but internally, every time he bought something expensive and searched for a justification. Image is an investment. Status works for you. People notice the details. They stopped at a coffee shop, grabbed coffee to go. Dan got it in cups with the place's logo, $12 for 2, and got back in the car. Dan asked, "So, what do you think?" Tyler said, "Beautiful car." Dan nodded with satisfaction. Tyler looked out the window and thought about the numbers from David's napkins. A 2-year lease, $500 a month. That's $12,000 over 2 years just in payments. Plus insurance. Comprehensive coverage is mandatory on a leased Tesla. That's at least $2,000 a year. Plus maintenance. Plus charging. Plus parking. He didn't say the math out loud. Dan didn't ask. Then Dan said one more thing. He said, "I got a watch too, check it out," and showed his wrist. An Apple Watch Ultra, steel case, dark face, looked convincing. Tyler asked, "How much?" Dan said, $800, finance for a year, $65 a month. Nothing. $65 a month, plus $500 for the car, plus rent, which Tyler knew was $2,000, plus food, phone, everything else. He quickly estimated in his head. Dan was spending more every single month than he earned. Not by a lot, maybe $100, maybe $200 in the red, but every single month. This was what it meant to live beautifully. They drove around a bit more. Dan showed off how it accelerates on the highway. Then they brought the car back to the courtyard. Saying goodbye, Dan said, "You should get yourself something nice too. Can't ride the subway forever." Tyler smiled and said, "I'll think about it." He went back home, sat in the kitchen, and opened his laptop. The spreadsheet was still there, the same one he made after his talk with David. He added a new sheet and wrote at the top, 6 months. 6 months ago, Tyler made the first decision of the kind he now internally called decisions of substance. He didn't buy new sneakers, even though he saw a model he really wanted. Instead, he put $200 into a savings account. A month later, he added another $150. He passed on 2 things he wanted to buy, but didn't. Then more. Then more. He listed in the spreadsheet everything he didn't buy over those 6 months and how much it would have cost. Sneakers, $250. A new jacket, $400. A smartwatch he looked at 3 times, $800. Headphone upgrade, $300. A branded backpack he liked in a store, $250. A few smaller items, $1,600. Total unspent money, $3,600 in 6 months. He looked at that number. $3,600. That was more than his monthly salary. In 6 months, he simply didn't buy things he wanted, but didn't actually need. By the way, speaking of habits in practice, on my Telegram channel, I break down real financial decisions. No scammy info products or stories about making $1 million in a month. Just honest breakdowns of how the mindset around money works, and why most people keep working for their expenses instead of their future. Link in the description. Subscribe if you want to wake up in 10 years feeling like your money works for you and not you for it. And as a result, he had more money than he made in a month. But it wasn't just about the money. That was the second part of the outcome, the one that's harder to put into a spreadsheet. Something shifted in how he looked at things in stores. The old question was, do I want this? The new question was different. Why do I actually need this? Not in terms of utility, but in terms of the true reason. If the honest answer was, I want someone to see it on me and think I'm successful, he put the item back. It wasn't always easy. Sometimes he stood there for a minute, holding it in his hands. But he put it back. It wasn't asceticism. He still bought things, just differently. 2 weeks ago, he bought a winter jacket for $80. Unbranded, well-cut, warm. He'd worn it 3 times already and never once thought about whether someone was looking at it and judging it. Just a jacket, just warm. He thought about Dan. Not with judgment, with understanding. The kind that hurts a little because there's recognition in it. Dan wasn't doing anything unusual. Dan was doing what millions of people in his situation do, looking for a way to look the way he wanted to feel. The Tesla, the Apple Watch, the coffee in the right cups. Every item individually, completely explainable. Together, a system that ate up more every month than he earned. Tyler closed his laptop and looked out the window. The courtyard was empty except for the dark blue Tesla parked by the entrance, freshly washed, beautiful, and completely meaningless on this quiet Saturday evening. He thought about how he hadn't said anything to Dan, and how that was the right thing to do. Not because he didn't care, but because Dan didn't ask. People change what they decide to change themselves, not before. Tyler got up, put the kettle on, and took a mug out of the cupboard. An ordinary, white, unbranded mug, bought at Target for $3 3 years ago. Poured some tea, sat back down. $3,600 in 6 months, and a feeling that didn't fade on the 3rd day, because it wasn't about a physical item, it was about a decision. This turned out to be different, completely different. A year passed. Tyler was walking down the same avenue, past the same mall. It was November, cold, getting dark early. The Apple window glowed exactly the same way, soft, proper, convincing. In it stood the iPhone 16 Pro in a new color, which this season they called Natural Titanium. Next to it, the price tag, $1,199. Or $50 a month on a 24-month installment plan. Tyler stopped for a second, looked at the window, then kept walking. Not because the phone was bad, not because he didn't have the money, but because the question he didn't know how to ask a year ago, why do I actually need this? Now fired automatically, before the desire even had time to kick in. He walked into the grocery store, bought what was on his list, and came back out onto the street. The iPhone 15 was in his pocket. The exact same one, bought a year ago, working without a single glitch. He had long stopped noticing what he was holding in his hand. The phone had just become a phone. Over this past year, Tyler hadn't bought a single item with a logo larger than the tag on the inside seam. Not because he made a strict vow, but because every time he picked something up in a store and honestly answered the question, why, the answer about a logo no longer seemed sufficient. He walked home and thought about the numbers. In 12 months, he had saved $7,500. Not by giving up his life, but by no longer paying for feelings that lasted 3 days. $7,500 wasn't an abstraction. It was a specific bank account he opened separately and named simply for himself. Present. He thought about the 5 things that a year ago seemed obvious, proper, almost mandatory. First, a flagship smartphone. He understood the mechanics. A 0% interest plan isn't free. It's the store's discount to the bank baked into the item's price. The overpayment exists. It's just invisible because it's hidden in the structure of the deal, not the line item of the contract. A new model comes out every year. The 2-year upgrade cycle isn't a technical necessity. It's a marketing rhythm that most people align their finances to without even noticing. Second, branded clothing. The production cost of a basic item and its retail price differ by 5 to 8 times. The difference is the cost of the name. The name belongs to the brand, not you. You're paying for the right to temporarily wear someone else's reputation. It's a fair deal, but only if you understand exactly what you're buying. Most people don't. Most people think they're buying quality. Third, a financed or leased car. The illusion of affordability works like this. The brain perceives $500 a month as a small amount because it compares it to monthly income, not to the total payout over 3 years. The real cost of owning a car in the first year, factoring in the loan, insurance, maintenance, and downtown parking, is a massive chunk of an average earner's annual salary. It doesn't mean a car isn't needed. It means you have to calculate the total sum, not just the monthly payment. Fourth, a premium cashback card. The real average return across all spending categories is 2 to 3%, not the 5% written in the ads. 5% applies to narrow categories and is often capped by amount. Meanwhile, the card creates a psychological incentive to spend more actively. People with cashback cards spend an average of 12 to 18% more than those without them. The additional expenses exceed the cashback by 4 to 6 times. The bank knows this. It's not a secret, it's a business model. Fifth, branded accessories on credit. An Apple Watch Ultra for $800 financed. $65 a month. Sounds like absolutely nothing. But watches don't go up in value. They depreciate. In 3 years, they're worth $200 on the secondary market. You paid $800. The difference, $600, isn't just a loss in value. It's money you gave away for a feeling of status, which the people around you noticed about as carefully as the color of your socks. Tyler reached his building and stopped. Pulled out his phone, opened the banking app. The account he named Present showed $7,540. He looked at this number not with triumph, just with a quiet, steady satisfaction. The very kind that doesn't fade on the 3rd day. In 2 months, he planned to add more. He didn't know yet where he'd direct that money. Maybe taking courses, maybe paying his rent ahead, maybe just letting it grow. But it would be his decision, made out of true understanding, and not out of a desire for someone on the subway to look at him and think something nice. He walked into the building. In the elevator, he looked at his reflection in the metal doors, an unbranded jacket, an unbranded backpack, a phone in his pocket. An ordinary person, exactly the way he is. This feeling, being exactly who you are without a layer of other people's names on top, didn't come right away. It came gradually, as he got used to asking one question honestly. And now, standing in the elevator, he realized that this feeling was worth far more than everything he used to buy to obtain it. The elevator opened on his floor. My name is Mad, and I share these stories because I recognize myself in them. And I know you recognize yourselves too. Status items don't make us richer. They make the people who sell them richer. The difference between a person who looks successful and a person who becomes successful isn't salary and isn't their background. It's one question, asked honestly. Why do I actually need this? If this story shifted something in you, take out your phone right now, open your banking app, and calculate your spending on status items over the last 12 months. Not an estimate, exactly, using your statements. Write one word in the comments. Awake. I'll know that you watched to the end and looked at your number honestly. Subscribe to the channel. Here I explain in simple terms how the mindset around money works and the habits that change your financial life, not in 10 years, but right now. Because this is exactly how everything else begins.